Hey guys, Enigmatic Mr. L here. In this video, I want to look at every main series Fire Emblem game and determine what the worst weapon in each game is. So before we get into it, a few clarifications. I am factoring in stats like its might and its weight, its accuracy, etc., but that's not the only factor here, as there are strong weapons that have some sort of drawback that generally makes them worse than your iron swords and bronze swords that you're using at the start of the game. Those weapons might be weak, but when you first start out the game, you don't have many alternatives, so they do serve their purpose well enough. They have any sort of major drawbacks. If you get them very late or very few characters can use them, that's going to be a factor here. I'm not taking into consideration staffs, but I will be considering equipable magic tomes. I'm not factoring in broken weapons since they're not the best version of whatever weapon they're supposed to be. Like broken weapons like Genealogy, the Holy War, Thracia 776, and Fire in Three Houses, so you can just repair those weapons. I'm not factoring in joke weapons like a giant lollipop or croissant from Engage, since those weapons are supposed to be bad. With that out of the way, let's just get onto the list, starting with Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. For the worst weapon here, I think it has to be one of the ballistician weapons, and I decided to go with the Stone Hoist, just because of its massive weight and very shaky accuracy. You can't really talk about ballista weapons here without talking about your two ballisticians, Beck and Jake. They're both bad units. They're basically just like a cross between an armor knight and an archer, with both classes that aren't that good to begin with, and takes the worst aspects of both of them. Ballisticians do have pretty good defense, and they have high attack power, but the problem is they're slow movement, they're slow speed, they're low movement, and being locked to two range exclusively just makes them pretty lousy. So, yeah, just generally you can pick any of the ballistician weapons. You could go Stone Hoist or Thunderbolt, but I think it'd be one of those. So, Fire Emblem Gaiden, this was actually the trickiest one for me to determine what the worst weapon is. I think the default natural answer would be some of the zero might, just base weapons. When you don't give a character like a weapon specifically, like zero might swords or lances, but they're not really equipable. That seemed like kind of a cop out to pick them. So I went with the javelin. I know that's pretty surprising given how powerful they become in later games, but here they do have 1 to 2 range. That shouldn't be ignored, and they do increase your attack power slightly. But the slight weight and especially this shaky accuracy for just a slight boost in power in a game where you really want accuracy. That's why I went with Javelin here. But if anyone knows any better alternatives, worst weapon in Gaiden, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Next, we have Mystery of the Emblem. And since I'm combining Book 1 and Book 2 into the same game, I went with the Silver Axe. So in Book 1, there is only one Silver Axe. It's from an enemy drops it, and it's pretty easy to miss. And yeah, while Silver Axe is better alternative than the Devil Axe if you can wield both, the fact that the Devil Axe has a much lower weapon level rank means that in some situations, a character like Barst or someone, they might use the Devil Axe because they don't have better options. It's just kind of a high risk, high reward thing to use. But Silver Axe, again, there's only one high weapon rank to wield it, easy to miss. It's not that useful. It's not particularly useful. And then in Book 2, there are no playable axemen, but they're still Silver Axes, and they literally exist just to sell to get money. If I was just judging this Book 2 specifically, I think picking Silver Axe would be a bit of a cop-out answer, but since I'm combining them into Book 1 and Book 2 into one game, Silver Axe is technically usable in Mystery of the Emblem. That's my pick here. For Genealogy of the Holy War, we got a few good candidates. Axes, just in general, besides the Brave Axe and the enemy-exclusive legendary weapon, they're not very good. The Hand Axe has a huge, I think it's 20 weight and 50 accuracy. And Iron and Steel Axe are just outclassed by the Brave Axe. But I decided to go with Bolganone. So this weapon you get in the penultimate chapter of Generation 2. It's already has problems because it has a massive, 12 weight, shaky 70 accuracy. Really, just fire magic and Genealogy of the Holy War in general is bad because the equivalent tomes in Wind and Thunder, they have the same accuracy and power, but much less weight. But the real reason why Bolgnone's on here is because of its A rank weapon requirement. And unlike other games where you can just use fire tomes repeatedly to raise your weapon level, in Genealogy of the Holy War, you have set weapon ranks determined by your class and your holy blood. Again, in fact, as get in the penultimate chapter, there are only 4 potential characters you can use it. 3 out of 4 which are determined by their parent. You have to have Azel be their father. And while Azel x Tail 2 is a fairly common pairing, both of them, by this point, they probably have better options all around. You could go with Azel x Ernest, have Ced use it, but that pairing, I think, is a little underrated, but still you have better options all around, which just leaves Leaf as the only character by default who can wield it. And since Leaf can literally use any weapon in the game, excluding like dark magic, and he only has a C in light, but I'm not sure if there's any weapon that, below C, but since Leaf can use any weapon, he generally has just better options all around, including you get the Tornado in the very previous chapter, which is basically, I think, just the same power, just less weight if you want to use magic. And in general, Leaf's magic isn't that great. I mean, you can use magic since you have multiple weapon slots. You can have that as an option, but even if you're going magic, you have better options than this for Leaf. All right, next to Gaiden, Thracia 776 was the most difficult pick for me, as I don't feel like there's any truly useless weapons. In the end, I decided to go with the Slim Sword. So Slim Sword was introduced in the previous game, Genealogy of the Holy War, and in that game, it was just a strictly better version of the Iron Sword. But here, and in like most later games, it acts as a more extreme sword. It is less powerful, but it has less weight and more accuracy, even like a little bit of crit chance. But the thing is, swords never had a problem with accuracy or weight, so most of your characters aren't going to get weighed down by a basic iron sword or face accuracy issues with that. And just the less might on a weapon that really needed might in the first place means that there's very little reason to use this. Although I could see a few niche uses, maybe if you're trying to weaken an enemy to get the kill to someone else you want to train, or more likely it's like you want to weaken an enemy just enough to like capture them in Thracia 776. So there are marginal uses for it, but I couldn't think of anything that particularly worse than that. Next, we have Binding Blade. Really just the GBA games in general. The Silver Blade is a pretty lousy item. It has marginally more power than a Silver Sword, it being much more expensive, it's being much heavier, and it has shakier accuracy. Binding Blade in particular, there's a few good candidates to consider, like the Steel Axe and Steel Lances. They have really shaky accuracy in a game where you desperately need it. Hammer is very niche, but that still has some uses, like in Chapter 7 or in Chapter 2. So I decided to go with a weapon that I don't think anyone is ever going to be able to use, just period. Not just niche situations, but unless you go extremely out of your way. And that's our first legendary weapon on this list, is the Aureola from Binding Blade, S-Rank Light Tome. So you look at it, its stats look pretty good. 15 might, 98 hit, in a game where you really want hit, that's good. 1-2 range, grant resistance. You don't get it super late in the game either. You get it in the Gaiden chapter, chapter 16X, so you do have time to use it theoretically. The problem is that S-Rank light requirement. There's only 3 potential characters who can use this: Saul, Ellen, and Yoder. Saul and Ellen both start. They can exclusively use staves. They can't use light magic until they promote. And then even if/when they promote, they only have a D in light magic, so it requires heavy grinding to get them up to S. And most likely they're going to want to be focusing on like their staff rank, and like up to A rank to use warp. And then once they get to A rank staffs, you're going to be using warp and other staff related things. So it's really just kind of out of your way to get it for a weapon that's frankly not worth it. Yoder joins with an A rank in light, so you think it might not be that difficult to get him up to S, but he joins. There's 2 chapters left if you don't get the best ending, and then there's about like 4/5 chapters left if you go for the true ending. And here has an S rank in staves. Most likely you're going to be using Yoder to make use of that staff rank. And he's also at cap level. He doesn't gain anything from combat. So really, I just think while the weapon itself isn't terrible per se, no one is ever going to use it unless you go extremely out of your way for the sole purpose of using it. And there's really no reason to, since you have other legendary weapons to deal bonus damage to dragon units. All right, next we have Blazing Blade, and there are a few obvious candidates jump to mind. Everyone already mentions like the Soul Caddy. It's Lynn's exclusive weapon in like the penultimate chapter. It has less might than a silver sword, and it's heavier than a silver sword. I think it's actually heavier than some of the axes in the game. There's also Eliwood's Durandal, again another like lackluster unit, and unlike in Binding Blade, they just added 4 more weight to the Durandal. So unless you go really out of your way with like body rings and speed wings, he's going to get weighed down by it a lot. But I think both of these weapons have very niche uses. They deal bonus damage to like the dragon, and sometimes that can be like your only option to do it. If you bother to train up Lynn, she can at least do damage to like the dragon. That's something, I guess. In my hard mode playthrough, Hector hard mode, I did make use of the Durandal. I gave Eliwood a body ring, which you could argue favoritism, and that's fair enough, but he was able to deal good damage to the dragon. So I decided to go with Gespence. It's a S-rank dark tome, so the only characters you can use it are Athos, who already comes in with weapons like Four Blaze and Oriala, which is better in this game, who can deal damage that way, and Canas if you trained him up. Athos, like I said, already has better options all around. And if you bother to train up using Canas, you're much better off just using Luna. This thing has massive 20 weight, and even though Luna has like 1 or 0 might, enemies in this like penultimate chapter and ultimate chapter have such high resistance, you're better off just using Luna. All right, Sacred Stones. Again, there were another game which had a lot of good contenders. There is the Short Bow, which has comparable weight to comparable strength to an iron bow and same accuracy, but it's much more expensive. It's only upside being a slight chance to crit, but at that point, just go with like a killer bow. But it does grant 2 weapon EXP per use, so that is something if you wanted to try to like grind up someone's bow rank quickly. That's a niche use for it. There's also the legendary Dark Tome. I think it's Gleipnir. So that one is the only legendary weapon that doesn't deal bonus damage to monsters, and it has like a huge weight problem. So Ewan and Noel, who are all like dark mages, besides like Leon in the post game, they're better off just using the basic Flux Tome since they can at least double with that. But in the Lagda Ruins, the final like area, the dragons are so slow that my Ewan at least could like double them using Gleipnir. So that's a very niche like marginal use. And I decided to go with Eclipse, mainly just due to its like abysmal like 30 base accuracy. I did mention that I could train Ewan up for like the Lagda Ruins, but if you're just in like a casual playthrough, you're probably just better off using Ewan in general, just because like he's a training unit, extremely low base stats, and Noel's better off summoning. So even just getting to like B dark magic is like a bit of a stretch. And even if you do, they're just better off using like summoning. Like Noel, his best use is just promote instantly to a summoner, heal occasionally, mostly just summon phantoms. Ewan probably like the same thing. And just that shaky accuracy, even if you do like heavily invest like into the characters that had like a coin flip accuracy to do just half the damage, not even like one hit KO the opponent from far away. I guess it's like at least safe since you're attacking so far away. If you miss, it's not like you'll face a counterattack. But it's such a niche, like marginal use, I don't see any like real use out of it. Next, we have Path of Radiance, another game with a lot of good contenders for worst weapon. Slim Swords return, one of the worst like they've been like in the Tellius series, just very, very outclassed by Iron Swords. And you got weapons like the Armor Slayer that are supposed to be effective against certain things, but in reality, they end up being like okay at the thing they're supposed to be good at and just abysmal at anything else. Everyone's kind of mentioned like the double bow. It's a bow you get in the penultimate chapter, requires an S rank in bows, locked to snipers, so only Shinon and Rolf can do it, both questionable long-term units. Because by the time Shinon rejoins, he only has 9 strength, and Rolf is like very low bases, and he joins in like chapter 9, requires a heavy grind to get up there. And it's locked exclusively to 4 range, not 3 to 4 or 2 to 4, exclusively 4 range, and its like stats are comparable to like an unforged like iron or steel bow. But in Path of Radiance, and increase the amount of distance wall tiles count as. So in the chapter you get it, you could use it to like snipe between walls. That's something. Very marginal use, but at least you get the double bow basically for free in the chest. My pick for Path of Radiance is like so obscure and so out of your way to get it, borderlines and just like unusable. I went with the Rex Aura Tome. So looking at stats, it seems fine. 12 might, 85 hit, plus 3 defense. In order to get this, in the literal final chapter of the game, you have to silence a specific enemy. Then you have to injure him, so he'll use his elixir and unequip the Rex Aura, and then you can steal the tome. And even then, the only character that can use it is Riss, if you've managed to train him up and use him, like, get his light magic up to S. And even then, at that point, you're really only a big objective of that match to defeat Ashnard, which only certain units can damage him, and Riss is not one of said units. So I really question like any use you could get out of this tome. The only reason you do it is just to say that you did it, like you trade Riss up to like S rank magic, which to be fair is not like a bad unit or anything, but still. And then you go with like this highly specific setup to get it. Don't really see any use out of it. Then we have Radiant Dawn, which again, I went with a weapon that pretty much no one is ever going to be able to use. This time it's the Rex Bolt. It's a double S weapon. Looking at stats, it seems fine. 12 might, kind of heavy, but okay. 15 crit, 95 accuracy, plus 3 skill. The only character who can use it is Ileana. And when she's in the Dawn Brigade, you probably don't want to invest too heavily into her because the other units need it since they're going to be around longer. And then once she travels over to the Grail Mercenaries, if you didn't train her, she's going to be lagging behind a lot to her like fellow Grail Mercs. So I have heard of people like using Ileana long term, but you know, there's nothing wrong with favoritism. I do it all the time, but unless you go like highly specific out of your way to train this unit, which has like problems in doing so, make the game hard for you, you're never going to really get a chance to use this weapon at all. Next, we have Shadow Dragon, which I went with the Falchion. Might seem a little weird using like the hero's like ultimate weapon here, but in Shadow Dragon, like all the game's narrative like intends, like says this is the intended way to defeat Medius. But if you're playing on anything above like hard mode, Medius will most likely like return the favor and just one round KO Marth, as it doesn't deal like enough damage. Like generally your best options dealing with the final boss are like attack him with like a ballista weapon, get crit, do some damage, warp in Tiki or Naga, then like revive them, warp them in again. Marth just doesn't really have the strength to deal meaningful damage to Medius. He might not even be trained if he's just been focusing on like getting chests, visiting villages, that sort of thing. It does have a marginal use, like if you manage to weaken Medius down, Falchion can be one of the few ways to like land the killing blow. I've seen that done before, so that is something. But just combine that with the problems I mentioned earlier, and the fact that you get this weapon like extremely late into the game. That's my pick for Shadow Dragon's worst weapon. Next, we have New Mystery of the Emblem. Originally, I had the Devil Axe here, just because I think in previous games, like Shadow Dragon, Blade of Light, Mystery of the Emblem, Shadow Dragon, despite the obvious risk of the Devil Axe, you could be forgiven for using it, just because you don't have any better options all around. And in Book 2, New Mystery of the Emblem, you actually have playable axe users, so Silver Axe has more use. But in the end, we have our first and only time where like the worst weapon wins multiple games. We once again have Bolganum. So this time you look at it, only requires a C rank and magic in a game where you can just grind magic rate by using tomes repeatedly. 12 might, weapon weight isn't a thing in this game, 70 accuracy. So you're looking at it, you think, what's the problem? Well, you get this in literally the final map of the game. There's only one. It's in Elisa's inventory. And you're probably just going to use those 4 like clerics to just kind of rescue staff or that sort of thing. So I really question any use someone could get out of this thing. Even if you did find some marginal use out of it, I don't think it would amount to like the marginal use you could get out of other weapons like the Devil Axe or something. Next, we have Fire Emblem Awakening, which I went with the Opposing Axe. So, as a massive 14 might, it's abysmal 35 hit, combined with the fact the only way you can get this weapon, it's not sold in shops, you have to get it from event tiles and or Brax conversations, just make it really unreliable in more ways than one. Next, we have Fire Emblem Fates, which really you could go with any of the high weapon rank, like A or S rank weapons here. Intelligence System was still trying to figure out how to like balance S rank or high rank weapons in a game without weapon durability, and it really shows in these weapons. Like silver weapons are kind of bad; they're like the stat penalties they inflict are severe, but there's some marginal use for them. If you need just like a little bit more might to defeat that enemy, you can just defeat them and suffer the stat penalty next turn. Like, oh well. But the S rank weapons are like the really like late game weapons. They're bad just because you get them so late. Only so few characters can use them. Like the S rank weapons, they're locked to like certain classes, which are like foot locked and mono typed locked. And the drawbacks they inflict are so severe. Really, you can just do any of them here, but I went with Genealogy here. It's actually an A rank tome, not an S rank. Does have good might, shaky accuracy, but the big drawback here is it halves their magic until they attack again, no matter like how long you wait. Really, there's no reason to use this. If you just want like player pays like burst damage, you can just go with the lightning tome. It allows you to like attack twice. If you want like more enemy phase, you just go with like a forged thunder tome. So there's really, I think, I'm struggling to think of any situation where this would be like particularly useful. Next, we have Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, where again we have a character's like ultimate weapon. This time it's Celica's beloved Sophia. So this weapon itself, it's not too bad. It grants recovery in a game where like your spellcasters could really use that, because anytime you use magic, drains the user's HP. So that's good. Stats are fine. The main problem is it requires an extensive amount of like gold and silver to like upgrade, and you're better off just spending that somewhere else. Plus, if you do upgrade it, it kind of is a side grade in some ways, because anyone can use the like gold dagger, but only Celica can use the beloved Sophia. And while she can use it fair enough, she has other options available to her, like certain rings. I did consider putting in the Shadow axe here, which is literally unusable since you don't get any playable axe users. And I got away with that in book 3, Mystery of the Emblem, because there's technically you can use the silver axe in book 1. It felt like a bit too much of a cop-out here, and it does serve a purpose. You can use it into certain quests and get some money out of it, so that's at least something, I guess. But here, the weapon itself is fine, but just obtaining it, you're better off just using those resources elsewhere. Next, we have Fire Emblem Three Houses. Originally, I considered something like the Sword of Moralta or the Tathlon Bow. Those are both Azure Moon exclusive weapons you get in like Part 2, and they're kind of out of the way to get. They both grant passive healing, and despite what some people online say, you can really give them to anyone. They don't have to like bear a crest or like the specific crest. The healing amount gets lowered. But those weapons, if you do go out of your way to obtain them, I think they're like fine to use. They can be helpful. So I decided to go with the hammer. Now, hammers in general were like a strong contender and like for worst weapon in Genealogy or Thracia 776, like games like that, or a Binding Blade. But here I chose the hammer. It has the same usual problems. Like, yes, it does effective damage against armor, but you know what else does strong damage against armored units? Magic. And you also just have like combat arts like the Helm Splitter to deal with armored units. Then just on top of that, the problems it already has, the big reason why it made this list is just because it's outclassed. Hammer sits in the middle of like weapons like the mace and the axe of Ukon Basara or the axe of Zoltan. The mace, even though it's weaker, it's 10% more accurate and it's significantly lighter. And then the other weapons, the axe of Ukon Basara or the axe of Zoltan, they're both just have better stats across the board. So take a weapon that already was problematic, just outclassed by magic, combat arts, that sort of thing, suffer from shaky hit rates and high might. Just add on to that, it's small niche it does have, is outclassed by other weapons, and that's my pick for Three Houses. Next, we have Fire Emblem Engage, where I went with the Master Lance. It's one of Leaf's kind of engage weapons. If you look at the stats, you can already see some of the problems here. Only a low might of 7, high might or high weight of 16, and shaky accuracy of 55. So you already see the problems. Plus, starting with Fate's Brave weapons, they only get their Brave effect if you initiate combat with them. So you can already see the problem here. But the main kicker while it's on here is that all these weapons I mentioned previously, they don't hurt. Like, some of them, they might be out of your way to get, and you're not going to bother get them, but if by chance you do have them in inventory, doesn't hurt you, this time it actually does. Or it can, potentially. Because of Leaf's ability, adaptability, once you engage with Leaf, he will switch to the weapon he considers best during the enemy phase, but he has a very questionable take on what's considered the best weapon to use. Because he prioritizes always attacking at range, and he prioritizes having weapon triangle advantage, even though switching over to Lance, like a sword enemy, doesn't do you anything on enemy phase. It's massive 16 weight. Even though Leaf grants some builds, you're still very likely to get weighed down by it. He can switch you over to this Master Lance. You'll get doubled by the enemy and potentially die. In fact, many players don't bother advancing Leaf's bond rank to the point to get this weapon. They leave him at level 10 or so. I did also consider the Light Brand here, which is another one of Leaf's engaged weapons. The problem with the Light Brand is just it deals magic damage. And if you're having on a character with primarily physically oriented attack, they're probably not going to do much with it, but at least that won't actively get them killed, unlike the Master Lance here. So, yeah, that's why this is my pick for Engage's worst weapon. There are other bad weapons, but just having the inventory doesn't actively hurt you. Alright, and that was my list for your worst weapon in every Fire Emblem main series game. As always, thank you so much for watching. Any comments below on weapons you think I underrate a bit, I think they have marginal use, or you have a better option for contender for worst weapon in the game, please let me know in the comments below. This is Enigmatic Mr. L, signing out.